PNC News First is presented by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Pizza Hut, we're taking pizza where it's never been before. Taco Bell, the only place where you live Moss. Guam Auto Spot. Colgate, the #1 brand recommended by dentists. And IT&E, Life in Motion.
Live from the broadcaster Akata, Tumon, Guam. Broadcasting in Guam and Saipan. Here's Janella Carrera and Clint Rigel with Donna De Jesus and Rebecca Elmore. PNC Sports with Leo Payumo and Weather with Chelsea Cruz. This is PNC News First.
Confident, good evening and welcome to PNC's News First. We are live from the Broadcast Center Akanta in the heart of Tumon. I'm Janella Carrera. Thanks for joining us tonight. Your top story. Arrests have finally been made in the Justin Meno assault case at the Manila prison compound. 2 inmates, Jeremiah Isazaki and Albert Babauta Santos, are now facing attempted murder charges. Here's more. It's taken more than 2 months, but Guam police have finally made an arrest in the prison beating of detainee Justin Meno. Meno was found hogtied and unconscious on the morning of March 29th at the yard of the Post 6 unit, which is a max security unit housing some of DOC's worst criminals. Post 6 is supposed to be on lockdown 23 hours a day, and prisoners are only let out for an hour at a time on a staggered basis. But on March 29th, several inmates were let out of their jail cells to assist with cleaning up a sewage backup flooding the East Wing. Internal Affairs investigation reports indicate the sewage backup was intentional. According to a magistrate report, Meno had been moved several times because of his behavior. When officers found Meno, the report states that they initially thought that he had died. And at the hospital, doctors told officials that Meno would probably not survive, or at the very least, he would be in a vegetative state. However, after coming out of surgery and spending several weeks in the ICU, Meno eventually regained consciousness. Police say when they interviewed Meno several weeks after the incident, he was able to identify his attackers by nodding at a photo lineup of prisoners based on a narrowed down list of those who were let out of their cells the day Meno was nearly killed. Quote, victim nodded his head yes to 2 of the pictures. These 2 individuals were Albert Babauta Santos and Jeremiah Isazaki, end quote. Isazaki and Santos are now facing charges of attempted murder as a first-degree felony and aggravated assault as a second-degree felony. According to the report, Isazaki turned himself into police on Wednesday, but denied any involvement in Meno's beating. Santos is being held on $100,000 cash bail, while a summons has been issued to Isazaki, who has yet to appear before a judge in this case. In other news, Governor Eddie Calvo officially filed a request for declaratory judgment with the Supreme Court of Guam over the interpretation of the Organic Act with regards to the number of votes necessary for the legislature to pass a bill. The governor is looking to the Supreme Court to settle a dispute between the executive and legislative branches over the TRAN, or Tax Refund Borrowing Bill. The bill failed to pass by the legislature as it had a 7-6 vote. Guam law and the legislature's standing rules require a bill to receive 8 yes votes in order to pass. However, Governor Calvo has maintained that the Organic Act of Guam only requires that a majority of those present during a quorum vote yes on a measure for it to pass. The governor also delivered a copy of the suit to Speaker B.J. Cruz's office.
For us, we do believe we can settle the question on that has been in the minds of folks for years on the organicity of the vote in a legislature and what it means to pass legislation. And at the same time, it's a good bill.
Speaker Cruz issued a response today saying Bill 1 did not pass. If Governor Calvo wants to ask the Supreme Court of Guam for permission to dig our island into a bigger debt grave, we will see him in court, end quote. Also in News First, Governor Eddie Calvo says that the $13.4 million surplus for 2016 is real. While about $12.1 million of this surplus is attributable to bond borrowing, the governor says this is not new debt, but rather debt that has been refinanced at a lower interest rate, resulting in millions of dollars in savings both up front and over time. In fact, the governor says that GovGuam could have had a larger surplus had they been allowed to finance more GovGuam debt at a lower interest rate.
It's not new borrowing, we restructured debt. And in fact, we could have had an additional $45 million in the kitty if we had, if Senator Cruz and Senator Sanilicas would have voted earlier in pushing this legislation. What it did was it just lowered interest rates, and it meant that we had less money to pay for an existing loan from the past. So it doesn't take any rocket science. There was no additional borrowing. It was restructuring debt at a lower interest rate that gave us upfront liquidity and also saved us on debt service payments. I think that's good news.
And the governor says tax refunds will continue to be paid out, vendors will continue to be paid, and there will be no Payless paydays. Well, things heated up today at the budget hearing for the Guam Department of Education, where the discussion quickly turned from appropriation to feelings of misplaced frustration. PNC's Rebecca Elmore has a story.
The Guam Department of Education has had enough of the politics.
I really take exception with it about this politics. How I feel personally is we're in the middle between the administration and the legislature. We're the bouncing ball.
Tense feelings boiled over at the legislature, where GDOE administrators told lawmakers to keep the political scoring out of the Education Department. GDOE is requesting nearly $327 million to cover the costs of the operation of 41 schools and other financial needs of the department. But the discourse quickly took a turn.
The lack of funding, that we don't get the appropriation that was appropriated to the department, and that's the hardship.
That struck a chord with Senator Michael San Nicolas, who reminded Gutierrez that it's Adelup, not the legislature, who's responsible for giving GDOE their appropriated funds. However, Gutierrez also sounded off.
But, it's not fair. I didn't come down here today to hear that. I just want to let all of you know my feeling. Not as a board member, but also as a private citizen. I have spent so many years in the Department of Education. But I, for one, on the board, will not take any political side. So I just want to make it clear, Senator San Nicolas, I respect your position, but I feel I've done a lot.
Gutierrez said board members walked to Adelup themselves following the last public hearing to inquire on the status of their allotment. Today's budget hearing comes just one day after Adelup touted a $13.4 million surplus for last fiscal year. If that's true, Speaker B.J. Cruz notes, then Adelup shorted education agencies across the island a total of $15 million in cash in FY16. Reporting for PNC News, I'm Rebecca Elmore.
Meanwhile, Chief Economist Gary Hiles gave a positive outlook on Guam's economy, predicting continued growth. Hiles is the chief economist with the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the Department of Labor and was a guest speaker at the Rotary Club of Guam meeting yesterday. He focused on Guam's economic state. He says Guam's gross domestic product has shown consistent growth driven by the investment in new buildings and the expansion of Guam's visitor market.
Each year, in conjunction with the budget preparation that's submitted to the legislature in January, I prepare an economic outlook for the fiscal year. This one is for fiscal year 2018. We look at the trends in the economy and different economic indicators and leading indicators of things like building permits and appropriations at the federal level that are likely to influence the direction of the economy in the year ahead.
According to Hiles, Guam is going to have continued growth as it's had in recent years, attributed mostly to tourism and construction. He says about 10% of Guam's employment is in the construction industry.
We're going to focus on the contribution to the growth, which includes tourism. Construction is a large component of that also. The H-2Bs accounted for about 1,500 out of right now, we still have about almost 6,000 employees in the construction industry.
And you can view the presentation on our website at pacificnewscenter.com. In other news, it looks like former cops David Manila and Anthony Kenga will not have to pay restitution to the victims in the Blue House prostitution case. At a restitution hearing today, the prosecution stated that the victims received compensation from the federal government, adding that it's GUAM's position that this compensation was enough. However, because Manila has a pending appeal, Judge Anita Socola will not be entering a judgment of no restitution until the issue is resolved. Manila's attorney, Terrence Timblin, says they just filed a notice of appeal with the Supreme Court of Guam. With Kanga, Judge Socola said she will also be holding off on entering judgment of no restitution since Manila is his co-defendant in the case. Kanga's legal counsel, attorney Sylvia Stake, will be withdrawing a motion to file an appeal. She says Kanga will be seeking new representation. All right, well, we have more news first coming up right after this quick break.